Hi, and welcome back to the Inside of My Head. We've done most evil Decepticons, we've still got most powerful combiners and most powerful primes to look forward to, but now it's time to look at the most powerful Autobots and everything they've had to sacrifice for their cause, which I'll follow up with times that Autobots have been evil. Hulking Great Flyer, big brain scientist, gets stuck in ice, like a lot. Let's talk Jetfire, or Skyfire. Jetfire, or Skyfire, used to be a Decepticon, and as such is treated with a little bit of suspicion by the other Autobots. But he's also a keenly minded scientist, and used to be best friends with Starscream, who was also a scientist. I think the best telling of Jetfire's story is in War for Cybertron Siege, where he sees that the Decepticon concept of war crosses his moral line and steps into murder and extermination, so he switches sides. He was thawed out of some ice in Gen 1 and then sacrificed himself, ending up back frozen in the ice again at the end of his first adventure.
We shall remember you, Skyfire.
He was later thawed again and became the Autobots' transport ship before Skylynx came along. His most notable deeds include being thawed out again by Starscream this time to help him stop Starscream's nearly undefeatable evil clone Sunstorm, who was burning up with the spirit of the fallen. And all this culminated in Jetfire flying Sunstorm high into the Earth's orbit as his internal fusion reactor went critical, Sunstorm going supernova, lol. Of course, Jetfire ended up frozen in the ice. Again. He saved Springer and Wheeljack from the Beast in the amazing The Beast Within, and of course the Bayverse version ripped out his own spark so that his body could be pillaged to give Optimus a fighting chance against the Fallen. But most notably, he used the Enigma of Combination to help Soundwave to reach the Afterspark, which is like the Transformer Heaven, to give Optimus the energy boost he needed to beat an Antillion known only as Unicron's creator, which I will come back to later. But to cross the divide between life and death to give Optimus a fighting chance at beating the architect of the most destructive force in the universe? Yeah, organize a parade. Because this guy is a hero. Alright, next I've got Ultra Magnus. Even though this guy was slightly beige in his character, on the surface seeming like a more dull version of Optimus,
You are no Optimus Prime.
they took that beigeness and pushed it to the max and made him a humorless disciplinarian, whose adherence to his principles could be a huge advantage, but also a bone of contention. Originally a member of the elite guards, he was put in charge of the Wreckers and tasked with bringing the rowdy bunch into line. He was even Optimus's superior officer in Transformers Animated. I always liked this guy. I love these big pillars on his shoulders and his beefy lower legs. We've seen him use blasters, swords, hell, in Galaxies he's even got his own mechanical suit, which I thought was badass. But the weapon that's become synonymous with the character is this huge hammer. He considered himself just a soldier, even though he's probably one of the best suited to command all of the Autobots, and has won the respect of both Autobots and Decepticons alike, even more than Prime in some cases. And over time, he seemed to get more interesting too, with it becoming clear that he's a long-serving general in Optimus's army whose loyalty to the cause is without question. Until we questioned it, that is, in War for Cybertron Siege, where he showed up to Decepticon HQ going, "Here, hey, you want some secrets? Take some secrets." Secrets. Of course, it turned out that he wasn't a traitor at all, and he got tortured and murdered for his trouble. Megsy Baby even keeping his severed head to talk to occasionally. The IDW continuity did something interesting with him, making him a legendary warrior that fought alongside Orion Pax in the earliest days of the war, becoming this undefeatable figurehead who would lift the morale of the troops. But it turns out that the original Magnus died in the early days of the war, and the legend was being sustained by Justice Tyrest, who built an Ultra Magnus suit of armor, which was worn by different warriors over the years. But this is one that really showed the power of the Ultra Magnus mythos. I'd say that one of his most heroic deeds, though, was planning to destroy the core of his beloved Cybertron to prevent it from falling into Megatron's hands, and very likely sacrificing himself in the process. This was all to atone for the fact that he'd completely bailed many years ago when he couldn't handle the burden of being leader, but he came back, regrouped the Autobots, and prepared to pay the ultimate price. Not the loss of his own life, but the loss of something that mattered to him even more, his homeworld. So to summarize, combat veteran, mastery of weapons, capable and experienced commander, lives by and is prepared to die for his principles, can only be beaten by the toughest of opponents. We're talking Overlords, Galvatrons, Megatrons. Give him a cup, give him a medal, because this guy is a hero. Next up, AUTOBOTS, custodian of history, grower of amazing facial hair. This guy makes the list because if it wasn't for this guy, we wouldn't really have a show. There's that. A member of one of the first generations of Transformers created 12 million years ago, AUTOBOTS was part of the large rebellion that frees the Transformers from their cruel creators, the Quintessence. And he's quite often the guardian of Vector Sigma, the ancient and incredibly powerful supercomputer that dwells at the center of the planet Cybertron. Vector Sigma serves as a link between the Transformers and their god, Primus, and can also grant access to the Transformer afterlife. Vector Sigma itself is pretty much impartial in the Civil War, so AUTOBOTS is the one who's in charge of keeping it from falling into evil hands. He rebuilt Optimus and Alita 1 and is generally a mentor and guardian of cybertronian lore and relics. So maybe not powerful in terms of fighting or combat, although I don't really remember seeing him in combat. But if knowledge is power, this guy has it by the truckload.
Next!
I'm going Grimlock. Strong, fearsome, pretty dumb, sometimes. In some continuities, he's really smart. It's just his vocal processors are all messed up. Imagine being some super genius like in your head and going, oh god, I'm gonna have to justify my intellect again. Alright, let's get it over with. And no fan of Optimus. Grimlock has been a mainstay of the Transformers universe since 1984. In one comic, this guy even defeated Titan Trypticon. When you consider that Trypticon is a Titan, he's like the size of Mount Everest probably. Personally, I've always wondered why a robot would choose this form. You know, if the purposes of their alt modes is to blend in. But it's kind of explained in one comic where they land on a prehistoric Earth and then choose forms to blend in there. I mean, he must have blended in really well with all those fire-breathing T-Rexes, I guess, but yeah, there you have it. Then they got trapped in tar until being woken up in modern times, where they must have been like, f it, I'm staying with the dino thing, I'm not changing now. IDW's origin had Grimlock as a warrior who met Slag in a jail cell, and together they put the Dinobots together from there, and they got their alt modes when they were attacked by these things called cybermorphic predators, which were these creatures that were formed deep in the belly of Trypticon. These alt forms gave them huge power, but also made them unstable, with Grimlock sometimes going into a rage so intense that he tries to kill pretty much everyone. In this storyline, he's treated more like the Incredible Hulk, where he kind of transforms and then goes a bit crazy, and then he has to be talked and calmed back down before he regains control. Grimlock has been the commander of the Autobots a couple of times in Optimus's absence, but it never really ended well, including one time where his own greatness went to his head and he ultimately became like a tyrant king. And yeah, Grimlock can be pretty arrogant. I guess it's a combination of his immense strength and kind of dimwittery.
Grimlock smart!
The thing about Grimlock is that he could quite easily be a Decepticon, believing that the strongest should rule above all else. But the reason he isn't is because he possesses one virtue that Decepticons don't, and that's compassion. Other notable deeds include biting Shockwave's arm off in Fall of Cybertron, and that's why he has that famous gun arm. And then he flames him and then fucks him off with his tail. Rude. He rushed in headlong to attack the Fallen before realizing the Fallen had near omnipotent powers, saved Optimus when Blitzwing had a clear shot at his head, and he may have actually been the one responsible for messing Tarn's face up, which is why he wears the mask. Dived in front of a bullet for Ultra Magnus and sacrificed his life. Oh yeah, and I think I might have mentioned he beat Trypticon twice. So in summary, enormous physical powerhouse, hates authority, but ultimately does the right thing in the end. Next on the links, I've put Skylist. Wait, no, that's not right. Here's a clip. I'm going to talk more about Skylinks in my upcoming Craziest Transformers Designs vid, but suffice to say, like, he's in that video for good reason. I'm not sure it's ever mentioned why he looks like this, but there has to be a reason why he's so different from the other bots. I mean, like a story reason. Basically, the RIL reason is that Hasbro licensed him from another toy line. But basically, he's a space shuttle with a big clunky base that grows a long neck and a tail, but whose head doesn't really transform at all, and whose base breaks off altogether and becomes its own sentient robot big cat, which leaves the top half with these tiny little legs. But despite his unconventional looks, he is one of the most powerful Autobots. Firstly, he big. If he can carry all these guys in his belly, well, yeah, big. Big chompy jaws, big scratchy talons. Big, I said. He's got blasters mounted on his neck and another searing laser in his mouth, which you would have thought would make it quite difficult to speak. And I think the Lynx, if I remember correctly, has a cannon on his back too. Oh no, he doesn't. That's awkward. Here's a clip. So plenty of firepower and plenty of muscle for grappling. If it ever comes to that. Actually, you never really see him grappling. Clip! Many of the details of Skylink's greatest deeds come from the bot himself, as he can't seem to go 5 minutes without telling everyone how great he is. His original marketing kicked off a rivalry with Predaking, but IDW also showed him facing off with Astrotrain, which seems like a better matchup to me. It makes more sense, after all, both are fundamentally transport ships. He was captured by Starscream in the 2004 Gen 1 comic, and used to train the Combaticons. And they really needed it. Starscream had installed energy dampers on him to stop him destroying them altogether, and as soon as they were switched off for 5 minutes, Skylink separated and wiped the floor with all of them, so Starscream promptly put the dampers back on to bring him back under control. We also didn't get to see what would have happened if the Combaticons would have combined, because no doubt Bruticus would have given them a much tougher test. He once saved Silverbolt from floating off into space after he blacked out. It's actually not that interesting a story. The most interesting thing being he can shoot his feet off like grapple hooks. He fought to stop Metroplex falling into Megatron's hands, and played a big role in this here battle to save Alpha Trion. But his sacrificiest of sacrifices came when he bore the brunt of Megatron's enormous blast in Earthrise, allowing the Ark to escape the dead universe, and atoning for trying to take the matrix of leadership for himself. So freakish, perhaps, but also legend and hero. Next up, Superion, the combined form of all the aerial bots, and actually the first Autobot combiner ever. Brought to life by Vector Sigma to battle Menasor, he had some early shaky battles but managed to pull it all together in the end. I'm going to talk more about Superion in my most powerful combiners video whenever I get around to making that. So for now, let's just say, hero! Rodimus Prime. So at first I thought Rodimus Prime might actually have a chance of being more powerful than Prime himself. I mean, if you consider that even though he was an impetuous hothead, he at least had some combat experience and was a pretty good fighter. Compared to Orion Pax, who's a fairly meek bot, maybe that extra experience in the battlefield might actually give him the edge over OP. But then when you consider the fact that he keeps having all of these doubts in his own abilities, these crises of faith, I can't really put him above the legendary Prime. Technically, he did kill Unicron though. That's gotta count for something. But all the same, I'm putting him under Optimus Prime. What hasn't been said about this guy? Let's be honest. He's my own personal childhood hero. Well, one of my childhood heroes at least. And of course, one of the most powerful Cybertronians to have ever existed. Cybertronian history is a pretty eventful one, isn't it? But Optimus is up there with the most influential figures in it. There aren't many that have been known to have beaten him in combat, although it has happened. And you know, he does die a lot, doesn't he? But let's be real, that's for merchandising reasons more than anything else. But the reason he's in this middling part of the list and not higher is because most of his power seems to come from the Matrix of Leadership. Now, the Matrix makes him the greatest Autobot of all time. Fact. But what it gives him isn't just down to power. It's a combination of strength, tactical awareness, and wisdom of the ages, plus whatever Orion Pax brings into the mix. But in terms of raw physical power, it's probably more powerful. He's used all manner of weaponry and defeated all kinds of foe, and his deeds and sacrifices are too many to list here. But just briefly, he had to leave his love, if love is the right word, Elita 1 on Cybertron, only to return to find her dead body in the snow. He jumped into a black hole to find the Antillion, a guy who had turned his home planet into the killing machine we know as Unicron. And before his creation destroyed the universe, Optimus helped the Antillion remember the name of his long-lost daughter, his one linkness he ever felt before losing himself in hatred. Optimus helps him remember that the universe isn't just a cold, uncaring place, and saves the day with a hug. Isn't that fucking amazing? Hero. Next up is what happens when you put the ultra-powerful Dinobots all together into the combiner stew. Yes, Volcanicus. I mean, just look at this guy. Just look at this guy. I don't really need to say any more than look at him. But seriously, we have not seen enough of this guy. He's popped up in Power of the Primes, which, let's face it, wasn't a good display for any of the bots, was it? Where he battled with Predaking and didn't do particularly well, which just didn't really feel right. In a one-on-one like this, Volcanicus should do way better. He was also featured in Transformers Cyberverse, but again, you're not really going to be able to see the brutality this guy can unleash in a kid-friendly cartoon like that.
Whoa! no!
In the Japanese Generation Select comic, he went up against Predaking again. Basically, there was this Decepticon called Grimmaster who was accepted into the Dinobots, and when Predaking tried to crush Grimlock, Grimmaster saved him by holding off his stomping foot long enough to say thanks to Grimlock for accepting him before he was crushed to death. Well, almost to death. As one final act before dying, he managed to give the Dinobots his Energon Matrix, which granted them the ability to form Volcanicus. Predaking doesn't stand a chance against this guy, and the Predacons are forced to disassemble and scatter. A convincing and comprehensive win for Volcanicus.
But wait! There's more!
There was another time that the Dinobots combined too. It was also sort of represented in possibly the best Transformers comic ever. The magnificent The Beast Within, where he one-shotted Predaking with one fell swoop of his sword. Yeah, to be honest, this wasn't Volcanicus at all. This was just called the Beast. And, But joking aside, I think it's only a matter of time before we get more Volcanicus, so hopefully it won't be too long before we undoubtedly get to see what a behemoth he truly is.
Hero.
Oh, in the making. Next! Omega Supreme, member of the legendary Guardian robots, charged with being the last line of defense of Crystal City, which was the most prized city on Cybertron. He and the other Guardian robots were created by the Quintessence to police the Cybertronians, and were kind of peacekeepers. I guess they weren't very good at their jobs, though. Huge intergalactic civil war and all. Anyway, Crystal City actually ended up being destroyed by the Constructicons, who built it in the first place. Oh my god, Omega, another failure! You're supposed to protect this city! Leaving Omega Supreme hell-bent on revenge. But long story short, he had most of his mind sucked out by Megatron, so he ended up being, forgive the pun, rather robotic automaton without much of a personality. But I love the retro vibe of this guy with his laser cannon on one hand and giant claw on the other. He's got a huge cannon on the back of his head so his head can spin around and become a turret. Plus his face looks like it's behind some kind of gas mask, which, you know, what would he need that for? To make him look cool is what? But regardless, he's known to be one of the biggest, strongest Autobots, and is the ultimate Autobot scuba diver. So following on from there, we've got Fortress Maximus. Depending on the continuity, Fortress Maximus is a colossal war machine, but often a reluctant and weary one. He's often portrayed as a unique three-part headmaster, meaning that his head is made up of a bot called Cerebos, who itself is made up of Spike Witwicky in his robot suit. In the Prime Wars trilogy, he was a Titan who was resurrected from being dormant by Windblade to combat the evil rogue Titan Trypticon. Oh, did I mention he's also the Starship Enterprise in the Star Trek vs. Transformers IDW comic? Again, he gets bonus points for that. And lastly, the most powerful Autobot ever, Metroplex. So if my city, the city where I live, suddenly took bipedal form and started walking around, it'd probably be some limping diseased giant with metric fuck tons of litter falling to the ground, homeless people screaming and running away, but not on Cybertron. This guy is Metroplex. And remember Sam Witwicky being towered over by Optimus in Michael Bay's first movie? Well, here is Optimus, the size of a field mouse, in Metroplex's hand. The size of these blasts that come from his shoulder cannons give you some idea of how much firepower this guy is packing, considering that he's covered in blasters and cannons and armaments. His most notable deeds include pancaking Megatron like a bug, teaming up with Trypticon to finally bring down Combiner Monstructor, and heartbreakingly,
take whatever spark that remains within me,
giving up the last of his Energon to power the Ark's engines, allowing the Autobots to escape capture and certain death at the hands of the Decepticons. Hero much hero.
Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. Till all are one.
Oh my god. Give him all the cups, give him all the medals, get the cheerleaders out. Name a park bench after him. You having a baby? Metroplex is a good name. Commemorative plates, statues, create an exact likeness of his face with those tiny little candles. Because this guy is all kinds, all shades, all genres of hero. So those are my most powerful Autobots. Be sure to let me know if I've missed any. Plenty of cool stuff still to come on the channel. Most powerful beings that aren't Autobots or Decepticons. Worst things the Autobots have done. A video about why Shockwave might be the most evil Decepticon. Plus loads of Rise of the Beast stuff. So make sure you're subscribed for all of that. Once again, thank you very much for taking the time to watch my vids, and I will see you very soon for the next one. Thanks for watching, and cheerio, bye!